Today we're going to finish up our introductory caged form lessons with just exploring how we can start in the open position and work through the sequence up the closed position, starting on each of the 5 forms. If you haven't looked at the earlier lessons, then I definitely would suggest going to the first lesson on caged, part 1, and then the second lesson on caged, part 2. And there are PDF files that you can get for those if you follow links to my website. I think that this is an integral study for the guitarist as they progress, because being able to understand the anatomy of the guitar and standard tuning is integral to just knowing how to apply scales and chords and arpeggios. And even if you don't think that you're using these forms, you likely are, even if you're just playing in partials, because partial forms, just 2 or 3 strings, which is most of the time what you're going to be doing, because to kind of cover everything it isn't realistic. But it's just kind of like the position idea on the instrument is something I think that gets neglected for most guitar players, for sure. And it's really the kind of neutralizing factor if you're trying to really understand the fingerboard, because it is a system, and even though the guitar is kind of a complicated system, it's definitely still a grid. So we've talked about this before, so make sure you know all 5 of your open shapes. That's kind of the reference point, so we'll just kind of briefly look at those. So we have C, A, G, E, and D. So those 5 shapes obviously spell cage. That's where we get that. And so you really want to understand that, because that's also going to be the spelling as we go through the sequence. But before we get there, let's just stop for a second and also talk about, just review the closed position. C shape or form, A shape or form, G shape or form, E shape or form, and D shape or form. That one's kind of a little bugger sometimes. So I use the terms shapes and forms kind of interchangeably. Usually the form is kind of like what I reference as the general just kind of concept, and then the shapes depend upon whether you're playing a scale or a chord in reference to the form. But either way, just don't get too confused. So anyhow, the way that these are going to work, and again, there's a PDF also for this if you go to the website, follow a link to the website. They're going to go in order based on where you start. So the thing that you want to keep in mind are where the root positions are. So for the C and the A shape, the roots are on the 5th string. For the G and the E shape, the roots are on the 6th string. And then for the D shape, the root is on the 4th string. So if we started with C and we wanted to move up the neck, that's going to be a 5th string root with a C shape. And we're going to stay on the 5th string and apply the A shape or A form. And then we're going to go to the 6th string G form. And then the 6th string E form. And then finally the 4th string D. It's a little easier up there. And what I'm doing is I'm hitting each of the roots because I want to identify them, just to kind of remind myself. So to do it a little bit quicker, we'd go through the form C, A, G, E, D, all in the key of C. And as we've talked about, I only use a couple of those, as those grips, so to speak. There's another word, grip, form, shape, whatever. But knowing that it's there references the position. So even though you might not grab everything, knowing what the reference is for the position is important. Okay. So let's keep going though, and we're going to now, if we start with A, it's also the key of A, and so we go from the A form, the next one's going to be G. The one after that's going to be E, then D, then C. I'm missing that high string. And remember, these grips, you're not necessarily going to play them always like that, so just knowing where they are is important. I use it, like I said, again, I guess I'll just be a broken record here, that I use these partials. And if I'm playing something like, if I'm referencing this C position, if I'm like playing these two notes in the key of A, I know that it's falling under that A shape. That's kind of what I mean, or that C shape in the key of A, sorry. Okay, so after the A, we get the G, so it's in the key of G, so it goes from the G shape or form to the E shape or form to the D shape or form, to the C shape or form, to the A shape or form, okay? So again, same idea, but since we're starting on G, we're sequencing through, you know, until we kind of get to the end of the sequence. So now if we go from G, we start now on E. So here's our E. So it's E form, E, key of E. Then we go to D. I'm having trouble with this guy, so I should be a little bit more careful. And then after the D, it starts the sequence at C shape or form, and then A shape or form. And then the last one in this case is going to be the G shape or form. All right? And then finally, we start with the D, okay? And that's the last of the sequence. So the very next one that we do is C form, and then A form, and then G form, and then I guess we're done. So, oh no, E form, sorry. So we've got that full sequence going every time. And then when you hit 12, you're going to start over. So I would recommend, you know, just kind of seeing what the next sequence would be. So like, for instance, if we stopped on the E form for the G, or for the D, the next one's going to be the D form D, again, starting over. It's going to be above the 12th fret, you know. Remember, Ry Cooder said anything above the 12th fret's just trick. I kind of agree with that, although, you know, we do get up there as guitar players. Most of my guitars are actually 12 fret guitars, which I prefer tonally, so it's harder to get up there, but, you know, you're just starting over anyways, so you want to understand that. So it might be a good idea. I didn't put that on the PDF because it's just hard to get that many, you know, forms. So I got all 5 and 5 positions. But you should be able to get it. You just would start over. This way we include the last one, but you should understand it. So take these through the sequence and then go one extra one if you want to, just so you can be familiar with where you would end up. So if you start on C, again, we'll just kind of go through this one again. If you start on C, then you'd eventually end on C way up here, which is hard to get, you know, even for me with this 14 fret guitar, but you go through the cycle. But again, it's important thing is just to go like through these and then back down, and then, you know, just get used to this kind of position shifting, and then back down. Okay? And it might be a little sloppy, but again, I mean, how often do you do that exact thing when you're playing? It's just more about being able to move these forms. And it's going to take a long time. You're going to really have to spend, you know, a good amount of time with it, because otherwise you're just going to kind of learn it once, twice. There's no application. So as we go forward, I'm going to try to kind of do some lessons on some simple tunes, talking about how, you know, you can apply 1 or 2 of these shapes and not necessarily all of them. We might also kind of look at how to approach these shapes by just the partials, and also by looking at just the top string, which is the next kind of big important thing for a solo guitar player. Because as we learn these shapes, when we learn these roots, even here, what we're doing is we're spending a lot of time with the bass, so the lowest note that you play. All right? And that's kind of how we've kept track as guitar players through, you know, learning these forms, because they just identify. So if I was to play like a bar chord on the 6th string in the key of G, I wanted, you know, I'd need to find G and then play that shape. It's pretty common. So what's more important though when you play is to know what's kind of here in the form, there on the form, and there in the form, because you want to play the melody up there. And you're really not thinking so much about what you're doing down here, except maybe just doing this bass. So then you kind of want to know, okay, I got G, D, B. So this may seem tangential to what we're talking about today, but it's not really, because that's the whole point, is to know what's in the form. So let's talk about more of that later. Let's end it today, and this will be, you know, kind of like I said, the final lesson here. And I think I see some weird strobing with the lights. Sorry, I got kind of like a shoestring operation going here, and I'm just trying to do my best to keep these consistent. So if you guys like these, let me know. Please subscribe, because that'll encourage me to keep going forward. And visit my website for some of these PDFs. And if you want some lessons on Skype, you can hit me up there. Or if you're in the Detroit area, I teach at my house and I teach out at my school. So until then, happy picking.